A single crack ended the largest obelisk in Egyptian history. The stone was pink granite, 138 feet long, close to 1,200 tons. The workers cut it partway free, then abandoned it, and no one ever moved it again. The tool marks stop right where the fracture runs. The ochre guide lines a foreman once drew are still on the stone. For 100 years, visitors have walked through the Aswan quarry and asked the same thing. How do you cut granite this cleanly with hand tools? Did the Egyptians really manage it, or is a piece of this story still missing? Granite does not give ground easily. It sits at 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. That is harder than the copper and bronze in nearly every Egyptian tool. Press a copper chisel against raw granite, and the chisel loses. It bends and dulls long before the stone yields. So the moment Egyptian builders needed granite at scale, for pyramid chambers, temple columns, obelisks at Karnak, they hit a problem no other material gave them. One explanation has been repeated in classrooms for a century. Workers pounded it. The tool was dolerite, a dense volcanic rock, tougher than granite. They shaped it into round hammerstones, small enough to hold in one hand. Swing one against a granite face, over and over, and the surface grinds down into a channel. It sounds crude, and it is. For decades, that explanation sat mostly untested. People repeated it because it was plausible, not because anyone had confirmed it worked at the scale the quarry shows. Dennis Stocks closed that gap. He trained as a mechanical engineer, then turned to experimental archaeology. He rebuilt more than 200 tools drawn from tomb paintings and quarry debris. He tested each one on real granite, at the University of Manchester, and on site in Egypt. His published work confirmed the old assumption. Dolerite pounding works. It grinds granite down channel by channel, in the same pattern you can still see in the trenches around the unfinished obelisk. In 2023, a research team put a number on it. They worked beside the obelisk. On a block, visitors can try pounding themselves. They used photogrammetry, a method that builds a precise 3D model from overlapping photographs to measure how much granite a dolerite pounder removes. The result, published in the Journal of Archaeological Science, reports, came out to 216 cubic centimeters an hour, at 85 hits a minute. That is slow, grinding work. Here is the part that gets overlooked. The authors read that slow rate as a sign that pounding alone was probably not enough. It points toward pounding and fire setting working together, not one hammerstone doing all of it. So the method is not an untested guess. It is measured, published, and real. That is not where the mystery at Aswan ends, though. The quarry was never one obelisk alone in the sand. Archaeologists working the wider site uncovered the remains of a harbor built into the quarry itself. That is solid evidence finished stone, left this spot by boat, not overland. Nearby sits an inscription from Thutmose III. It records his order for 2 obelisks to be delivered from Aswan to Karnak. A pharaoh's paperwork, surviving next to the stone it describes. Excavators also pulled thousands of dolerite balls from the quarry floor. These are the same hand tools Stocks tested, left where the workers set them down. And the deep, narrow shafts that some people cite as impossible technology have a plain purpose. Archaeologists identify them as quality testing pits. Crews sank them before a major extraction to check whether the granite below was sound or hiding flaws. Someone checked before committing months of labor to a single block. That is not a mystery. It is due diligence, written in stone. Pounding and quality checks explain the rough work. They do not explain everything in Egypt's finished granite. Some drilled holes and stone cores, pulled from deep inside granite sarcophagi, carry faint spiral grooves around the surface. More than a century ago, the Egyptologist Flinders Petrie noticed those spirals. He argued they pointed to a jeweled or toothed cutting edge, sharper than anything Egypt was thought to own. Later research complicated that answer. The spirals likely came from loose abrasive sand, probably crystalline quartz, dragged in circles by a soft copper tube. The copper did almost none of the cutting. It carried the abrasive, and the sand did the work. Egyptians used hollow copper tubes this way, drilling cores out of granite, much as a hole saw works today. The cylindrical plugs still turn up in museum collections, spiral marks intact. Stocks's replicas support that reading. The disagreement between Petrie's theory and the abrasive explanation is still a live, cited debate in Egyptology. A second method sits alongside the pounders in the record. Multiple studies point to fire setting. You heat a granite face until it is scorching, then douse it with water, and the sudden temperature change cracks the stone along the heated line. Ash and charcoal turn up in the Aswan quarries, in patterns that fit. How much of the real work fire setting did, next to pounding, is still argued over. Not because the tools are mysterious, but because the surviving evidence is mixed. Whoever ordered the obelisk aimed high. Egyptologists think it may date to the reign of Hatshepsut in the 15th century BC. Its size suggests it would have stood nearly a third taller than any obelisk Egypt ever actually raised. That includes the one from her own reign, still standing at Karnak, about 95 feet tall, the tallest obelisk left in Egypt. This was no routine job. It reached past what the quarry, and maybe the stone, could reliably deliver. Skill did not save it. The Egyptologist Reginald Engelbach mapped the site in careful detail in 1922, and his account still holds. As the crew cut the trenches to free the block, a crack opened through the granite. It almost certainly followed a flaw already hidden inside, invisible, until the cutting exposed it. The tool marks continue past where the fracture runs, so the workers kept going for a while, hoping the flaw stayed shallow. It did not. Someone in charge made the call. A cracked obelisk that size could shatter under its own weight the moment anyone tried to lever it free. The crew stopped mid-cut. They walked away from a job that may have run for months, and the failure was expensive, in a way the numbers make clear. A finished pair, from this same reign, took 7 months to quarry and move, according to the inscription on the standing obelisk's base. Months of a large crew, food, tools, and river transport, all rode on the stone staying sound. The story did not quite end there. Workers may have tried to salvage the cracked block, cutting it down to a smaller size. Some accounts place that effort under Thutmose III, Hatshepsut's successor. It failed too, and the ruined mass still sits in the quarry today. Other obelisks from this same site never hit that wall, and their journey shows what this one missed. Crews freed a finished obelisk from the bedrock. They hauled it on wooden sledges across trackways of wet clay or silt. The moisture cut the friction, so thousands of laborers could drag it without wheels, which would have sunk under that weight. At the harbor, they loaded it onto a reinforced barge. Then they floated it downriver during the Nile flood, when high water carried the vessel clear of the sandbars that would ground it any other month. Hatshepsut's own inscriptions describe the effort: a fleet of towing boats and oarsmen, pulling the barge upstream toward Karnak. The unfinished obelisk never reached the harbor its own quarry had built. It confirms the method anyway. The project failed exactly where a hidden weakness in the stone would make it fail, not where a tool or a plan ran out of power. So the unfinished obelisk was never proof of a lost civilization. It is proof of a real one. These people worked genuinely hard, stone with methods we have since tested, measured, and mostly confirmed, right down to the harbor, built to ship the result away. A few honest questions stay open, mostly around the finest drilled work. The giant marks across this quarry are not one of them. The granite kept its secret for 100 years. It took someone willing to pick up a hammerstone and try.